So thank you all for taking the time to join us for today's webinar. We know you are all very busy preparing your properties as various states and cities lift COVID-19 restrictions. With the lift of restrictions, many of you are experiencing an increase in bookings. Because today's travelers have an even more heightened sensitivity to cleanliness, hotel operators need to up their game to ensure a positive guest experience. That being said, bed bugs have not gone anywhere, and as occupancy slowly returns to normal, we want to provide you with some helpful information about how to mitigate bedbug risks in the post-pandemic era. But before I introduce today's speakers and provide an overview of the agenda, I would like to remind you that all phone lines in audio will be muted during today's webinar. If you have a question, please type that into the Q&A panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer all questions during the last 15 minutes of today's webinar. Now I would like to introduce today's speakers. Priyanka Lamba Nadgiri is Ecolab Pest Elimination's Marketing Manager. Priyanka manages our institutional segment business, which consists of food service businesses such as quick service and full service restaurants, hospitality businesses such as hotels, vacation resorts, cruise ships, and so on, as well as healthcare businesses such as long-term care and acute care facilities. She will be taking us through some of the initial content and coordinating the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. Dr. Joel Olsen has a PhD in entomology from the University of Minnesota and is our resident bedbug expert. She has been actively conducting research on bedbugs for over 17 years. In her current position as Senior Program Leader, Joelle manages a team of engineers and scientists that focus on developing and commercializing new innovations and science-based protocols. To give you a quick roadmap of this session, it would be impossible to talk about any topic in hospitality right now without putting it in the context of COVID-19 first. So we'll start there. Then we can talk about the public health significance of bedbugs, how you can mitigate your risk of future incidents of bedbugs, and then we'll talk a bit about what an effective partnership looks like between hospitality and pest management providers in the fight against bedbugs. Finally, at the end, we'll give you a chance to ask any questions that you may have to Dr. Olsen. Again, as a reminder, please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions throughout today's webinar. Now I'd like to turn it over to Priyanka to kick it off. Priyanka?
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing the agenda with us. Before we get into details around bedbug problems, let's first understand why this topic is so important to hospitality industry, especially with the current state of affairs that is coming out of the pandemic. Starting with some good news here, we're seeing a positive trend in the state of the industry today. The overall hotel demand in the US is expected to get close to 2019 levels by the end of 2021, which means we are going to witness this rubber band effect with the opening of economy. GDP is expected to grow by 7% this year. People are wanting to spend more, leading way for more leisure travel and hotel demand. This chart reconfirms the fact that mid-scale, limited service hotels are leading the industry growth, majorly driven by increased leisure travel, versus upper scale and luxury hotels are on improvement trend, but still have some runway to meet the 2019 levels. On one hand, leisure demand is likely to run 10 to 20% ahead of 2019 numbers. On the other hand, corporate travel is still below 2019 levels, but is expected to improve as the markets open. With too many rooms to clean on the weekends, shortage of labor is a big concern. Labor force participation is now at the lowest rate since the 1970s, and rising wage inflation is even louder today versus pre-COVID. All these factors are slowing down hiring back of workforce and posing a huge challenge to the industry today. With increasing lodging demand and lesser people to clean rooms, this is the best time to focus on bed bugs. As data indicates, we often see a spike in activity over the summer months starting in June. This spike is not only a result of increased post-COVID travel, but also during this time of the year, more people move in and out of healthcare facilities or multi-unit housings, in turn leading to moving more bed bugs around. With the potential for an increase in bed bug activity this month, and as properties around the country reopening, now is the time to focus on bed bugs, and you are making a great step by participating in this webinar, as you will learn more ways you can be proactive, protect your facilities, and educate your staff. From a hospitality business perspective, bed bugs can have a serious negative impact to your brand. People don't just tell their closest friends anymore about a negative experience, they tell all their friends, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, or other social media platforms. And unfortunately, bed bugs create a very negative perception about an establishment. Even though it's not possible to stop bed bugs from getting introduced, just one report of a bed bug incident at a hotel can impact whether a guest chooses to stay at that location. They may even associate that incident with the brand of the hotel and may not choose to stay at any location under the brand that has had a recent incident. An interesting study conducted a couple of years ago showed that one single bed bug sighting can lower your guest room value by up to $38 per night due to lost revenue from foot traffic or people not choosing to select the location. And this doesn't even include the additional expenses related to treating the infestation room and replacing infested furniture. A property manager's role is critical in ensuring and minimizing risk to the property and the brand. The two most important action items for a property manager is to educate your staff and employees and to partner with a pest professional. As a property manager, it is your responsibility to demonstrate due diligence if a bedbug activity is identified by hiring a pest provider to conduct an inspection, get any follow-on treatments done, and maintain service records for future references. Property managers are found negligent and liable when they fail to take action in hiring a proper pest professional or putting guests in a room that knowingly has bed bugs, or even worse, treating the infestation themselves. All this is not good. So let's start by educating ourselves on bed bugs and how we can deal with them. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Joel Olsen to take us further into the presentation.
Great, thank you, Priyanka. So let's start by going over some general biology and behavior so we can all better understand why this is a critical public health pest. Bedbugs are unique. They have multiple life stages with an egg stage, several smaller instars, there's about 5 total, and then they molt into their reproductive adult stages. You can see in the picture here that the eggs are tiny, single white colored eggs that are slightly glued or adhered to the surface by the female. The egg hatches in about 7 to 10 days into the first instar stage. And then each instar requires a blood meal in order to molt into the next stage before, again, becoming that reproductive adult. Once the first blood meal has been consumed, they go from light tan to a darker red or black in color, just depending on how much blood meal has been digested or excreted. So once they enter reproductive stages, females can lay up to 8 eggs a day, making that reproductive potential quite great once they become established. Bedbugs will feed on animals and other hosts, but they do prefer human blood. They don't drink water, and they're not associated with poor sanitation like other pests. They only require a human at rest for several minutes to consume that blood meal. And their entire life cycle takes about 6 weeks to complete. And they can live about 6 to 12 months. However, they can also live for 6 to 12 months without feeding. And this is what makes them a very difficult pest to eradicate. A treatment is required to eliminate bed bugs. Just shutting down a room or an area is not going to make them go away. Bedbugs are nocturnal human parasites. We often refer to them as an ectoparasite or a nest parasite, as they prefer to be close to their host, but they don't live on the body of their host as some other insect pests do. In general, bedbugs prefer rough, textured surfaces to harborage against, as the structures on their legs and feet don't actually allow them to navigate very well on smooth surfaces. They're attracted to a combination of heat, carbon dioxide, and human body odors. However, they can only sense these cues from about a foot or two away. So if the opportunity arises, each stage will feed on a weekly basis, but they can feed as frequently as every 3 or 4 days. And once they do feed, they immediately recess back into cracks and crevices to digest the blood meal and deposit eggs, which you can see in the picture here, with the eggs being those white, smaller pieces that look like small pieces, grains of rice. You can also see that the individual eggs are deposited close together. Some of the cast skins are molted, shedded skins, yellowish in color there on the slide. And some of the fecal spots. The spotting is really the most obvious sign that bedbugs leave behind. So I want to take a moment now to talk about the medical importance and significance of this pest. In the United States, bedbugs have been classified as a public health pest. While they haven't been proven as disease vectors because they don't transmit disease from one infected individual to another by feeding, but they do cause many different public health related concerns. First is the bites. Reaction to a bedbug bite can be severe, as you can see in the photos here, these bites can lead to large red welts or wheals that itch for many and last for many, many days, potentially even scarring their victims. However, not everyone reacts to the bites. In fact, only about 30% of the population on average has a reaction, and that leaves chance for many people to have been fed upon without even knowing. But chance of the reaction does increase with repeated exposure. So if you've been bit and then bit again, the chance of reacting may be stronger. There are some characteristic signs of bedbug bites. They're often more common on the upper portion of the body, as this is the area that may be more often exposed while the host is sleeping. The bites may be clustered together or could be spread into a line of several bites, as bedbugs, they have piercing, sucking mouth parts similar to a mosquito, and can potentially leave a mark each time they probe the skin in search of a capillary to feed from. Unfortunately, though, none of this is definitive evidence, as each individual responds differently. Thus, there's no way to look at the bites and determine if it was a bedbug. A medical diagnosis is usually determined based on anecdotal evidence, with doctors questioning, has the person traveled frequently, or do they know someone that has a bedbug problem? And those bites, so to speak, could actually be a reaction to another type of pest, maybe sandflies or biting midges outside of a resort or a hotel, or it could be scabies in a healthcare facility, or it could just be a reaction to the detergent used on the sheets. The only way to determine if it was a bedbug is to have the room inspected by a pest professional, which they can provide documentation and verification regarding the presence or absence of the bedbug. In addition to the bites, exposure to bedbugs can cause mental disorders such as PTSD or just general fear and anxiety. These impacts are often brought up in the event of litigation. So I just want to reemphasize the importance of partnering with a pest professional that can provide you with documentation in the event that a guest claims to have encountered bedbugs at your property. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. Bedbugs are not exclusive to hotels. And they're not exclusive to hotels or people that frequently travel. There's many places that can be impacted. As a leader myself in the commercial pest control services, I've personally experienced and supported bedbug infestations occurring in restaurants, even in outdoor dining and booth areas in warmer regions of the world. We've seen them in retail or office spaces, and that's usually due to staff or employees bringing personal items on site, or maybe even via the returned merchandise in a retail environment. Nursing homes and assisted living facilities have really become much more impacted by this pest over the last decade or so. And although COVID has slowed down activity in healthcare facilities, as the elderly population especially has been isolated from visitors, and even they've practiced social distancing probably more so than any other group. But we will see a rise in bedbug activity in this segment again as places begin to open back up for visitors and allowing residents to begin shopping and traveling again. The biggest challenge for healthcare facilities is the common areas, or spaces that often act as a distribution point for infested multiple rooms. There's also an increased risk of bedbug activity being transported around these type of facilities via walkers, wheelchairs, canes. Similarly, we experience massive infestations in multi-unit housing, as bedbugs can easily move between those apartments, either via the plumbing, the vents, or just based on the structure of the facility. They can crawl under doorways or between the walls. Bedbug infestations are prevalent in many types of businesses and private residents across the country and around the globe, and will continue to be prevalent as people move around and they travel more often, as that's starting to increase. So no properties are really safe from this risk. All right, so let's talk about how we can be more proactive and mitigate that risk. So let me just start by highlighting what the biggest risk concern is for litigation. We've seen an uprise in litigation when it comes to bedbug activity and property managers that we work with. In fact, 9% of bedbug incidences now result or end in some type of litigation or lawsuit, with an average settlement costing an average of about $17,000. In addition to that litigation risk, the cost of bedbugs is extremely concerning. With 47% of guests posting a negative review on social media, and just mentioning the word bedbugs can cost you future business. And even if the incident does not result in litigation, just dealing with an upset guest, moving them to another room, or perhaps treating or reimbursing for belongings, that alone can cost an average of $350. So there are many responsibilities that you have as a property manager. First and most importantly, you need to educate your staff and residents. Just like we discussed through the biology and behavior section here today, there's lots of training materials available that you can leverage with your teams. Your staff doesn't need to be an expert in this subject by any means, but they should be able to identify the signs of activity. You know, while bedbugs hide very well, once you know what to look for and where to look, you can find them pretty easily. Sharing pictures of bedbugs, their calf skins, the fecal spotting, which I showed you in some of my pictures, again, just creating that general awareness is going to go a long way. While the adults and nymphs can hide very well, that evidence that they leave behind is really quite evident. Therefore, it's important to conduct frequent inspections of high-risk areas, including around the bed, the sofa, or seating areas of a hotel, or any type of business, really. Do not move furniture from room to room within the hotel or office space or assisted living facility. Inspect items that have been stored or purchased or used. And specifically for healthcare facilities, again, recommend inspecting wheelchairs, walkers, or other individual modes of transport for any signs of activity, just to help continue to reduce that spread throughout the facility. We also want to limit the amount of personal items on site. I understand this can be difficult for hoteliers with guests checking in with luggage every day, but for restaurant, food and beverage facilities, and office spaces, you have the opportunity to limit the amount of personal items that staff or residents bring with them on site. Recommend separate lockers or provide plastic bins or totes for employees to help store personal items on site. This will not only help protect the individual, but it'll also protect your business from having frequent introductions of bed bugs coming from outside of your facility with your staff. Just a quick tip here, as far as laundering items or clothing that may be infested, do recommend putting them in hot water or place the items directly in the dryer for about 30 minutes if anything is suspected to be carrying bed bugs. And most importantly, I want to recommend partnering with a professional. Work together to develop an action plan for what to do if bedbug activity is suspected or identified at your facility. Your staff should close or limit access to any area that's suspected of activity so that it can be properly inspected and treated by a professional. Maintain records such as an action plan and service records for proof of service. This is important, and for future reference. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt do-it-yourself solutions, as this could not only spread the infestation further, but it could also indicate negligence, and which so could potentially result in litigation. Proactive inspections and treatments are also good options for these high-risk areas, so talk to your pest management professional for more options and details around that. One example of a proactive option is monthly inspection and treatments of rooms. There are products and other materials that can be applied that will help reduce your risk of bedbugs and other insect activity in guest rooms. Unfortunately, though, we can't stop insects from being introduced via those guest belongings, but there are options available to be proactive and help reduce that risk. So remember, one pest sighting can lead to a bad review that's seen by many. Again, talk to your pest management provider for more details about these services and offerings. But one other comment I'd like to make here is that many companies offer room rotational services, but it's important to be able to track these services so that you are making efficient use of the treatment and targeting every room at least twice a year, as products and materials may degrade over time and they may need to be reapplied or reinstalled. Historically, this type of room tracking was done manually using pen and paper. Today, there's many more efficient means of tracking room inspections and treatments using various digital tools. So not only does this take away the manual labor of searching for unoccupied rooms each month, it helps both parties strategically target rooms that haven't been treated in a while. All right, now that we've talked about how to mitigate your risk, let's discuss what to look for when developing a partnership with a pest management professional. When choosing a PMP, ask yourself the following questions, or ask them the following questions. What is your experience with this pest? Is an important one. Many companies offer bedbug services, but many do not actually have the experience necessary or knowledge to properly eliminate the infestation. Make sure that they can also provide educational materials and training opportunities. You also need a provider that will provide thorough and detailed inspection services, which often includes areas adjacent to the original infestation, as it's really important to determine not only how far the infestation has spread, but then provide that circle of protection around the infested area to stop the spread and eliminate the problem. You also want to make sure that you select a partner that uses a combination of chemical and non-chemical means of control. There is no silver bullet when it comes to bedbugs. I'll get more into the details around different treatment options in a moment. But finally, it's critical that they perform follow-up inspection and treatment services to ensure elimination of the pest. Those eggs are really difficult to treat. And as I mentioned earlier, it takes 7 to 10 days for those eggs to hatch. So incorporating at least one follow-up service a week or two after the initial treatment is very important. And regardless of the treatment performed, you want a pest management professional that provides detailed service reports and documentation. With that heightened awareness around bed bugs and potential for litigation, you need a partner that will provide and maintain proper documentation to help support you during any potential challenges that may arise. All right, let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about some of the various options we have available for inspection. First off is visual inspection. It remains the most common and effective means of inspection for bed bugs. Just as I mentioned earlier, knowing what to look for and where to look, such as those common harborage areas, is sufficient. A simple flashlight can help, and some people have even recommended UV lights to help illuminate those black fecal spots that we showed earlier. But that's not necessary. Just visual inspection without the aid of a flashlight is also sufficient, again, if you know where to look and what to look for. And having someone in the room doing regular room routine duties, again, doesn't need to take additional time out of their schedule to do this. They can, if they know what to look for, where to look while they're doing regular room duties, that can be a very effective means of inspection. Canine inspection has waned in popularity over the years. Early reports indicated that this was a very accurate means of detection of bed bugs. Bed bugs do emit specific odors or cues to the bed bug that dogs can be trained to. But however, more recent evidence suggests that the accuracy is actually quite variable in the field. The reason for this is it depends on how frequently the dog is trained, how the dog is trained, the environment they're trained in. And then for the bugs, it depends on where the bugs are located, the height of the infestation, the level of activity, whether or not the room has been treated before. So the more accurate the canine is generally comes down to the better trained they are. So something to consider. Monitoring devices have become more popular over the years, but they're not 100% reliable, and they vary quite a bit in how they function. So for example, the monitors listed on the left-hand side of the screen here are called pitfall traps or interceptor devices. They're left in the pathway of where bedbugs go to and from the host when searching for a blood meal. And the bedbug crawls into the device but can't crawl back out. And that's why they call it a pitfall trap. However, these traps need to be inspected and cleaned out frequently in order to maintain their function. Because once they fill with debris, an insect can just crawl right back out. And they're not very discreet. Additional options have emerged that use heat or pheromones to encourage catch. But as I mentioned earlier, bedbugs are a nest parasite, and they do not detect their host or other types of devices from very long distances. So this is also a challenge when these devices have to compete with a host in the room, basically a larger monitor. And these types of devices, whether they're the pitfall trap or they're more actively placed with lures and such, they still require inspection and maintenance. I don't recommend glue boards or sticky traps for bed bugs. Other insect pests will run right into a glue board and get stuck and then can't remove themselves. But as bed bugs navigate their environment, they're more cautious and they don't get caught on these devices as readily as other insect pests. So regardless of the method of inspection, if bed bug activity is noted, a treatment is still required. So when it comes to treatment options, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to use a combination of chemical and non-chemical means of control. So let me start here with just some comments around chemical applications. First off, not all products are created equal. There are many products labeled for use against bed bugs, but they don't all perform the same. And product formulation is critical. Whether it's a liquid, a dust, or an aerosol, you need someone with experience and insight into not only how these products work against bed bugs, but where to properly apply the product. As you may have heard, bed bugs are resistant to you may have heard bed bugs are resistant to chemicals. And there are, in fact, studies out there that have shown that some strains of bed bugs are resistant to certain products. And so there is some truth to that. However, there's still many products out there and available that are effective. The active ingredient, the formulation, and the surface you are treating is critical in how effective a chemical application will be. So again, really important to partner with an experienced professional, one that can fairly assess the situation and utilize a science-based approach or an approach to eliminate the infestation and guarantee that the area has been pest-free, again, before releasing that area for occupancy. Most importantly, avoid repellents or aerosolized products such as foggers. These foggers can be purchased from local hardware stores, but studies have shown that these type of do-it-yourself treatments are ineffective, and they actually cause bed bugs to spread further into cracks and crevices, or even move them into other areas or adjacent rooms, which at that point box springs. These are those non-chemical options.
We are currently experiencing some technical difficulties, so give us one moment, please, while we try and get our speakers back up and running. Thank you.
Melissa, can you hear me now?
Go ahead, Dr. Joel.
Okay, let's talk about these non-chemical means of control. So I just want to note that chemical applications, they have very limited efficacy against soft goods such as mattresses, box springs, or upholstered furniture. This is where those non-chemical solutions become more critical for that overall treatment. Non-chemical could be heat, so that could be structural heat or enclosed heat. An enclosed heat system will allow the treated item to maintain that lethal temperature within the enclosure, which is lethal to reach those lethal temperatures for bedbugs in the predetermined amount of time. And this type of treatment prevents spread of bedbug activity to other areas within the room. Whole room heat or structural heat options are also available, but they must be used in combination with a chemical treatment in order to prevent potentially spreading activity to other areas. Structural heat treatments also require an experienced professional with this type of treatment system in order to make sure that they're placing thermocouple devices to track temperature in the right areas, putting them in the known cold spots, which can be difficult to find. But it's important to make sure that they're able to also maintain those lethal temperatures using this type of treatment system. And steam cleaning can also be an option for chairs with a light amount of fabric. Steam isn't really recommended for mattresses or box springs, as the lethal zone coming from the steam unit does not or usually has a difficult time penetrating all the way through that material to make sure that you're getting the most effective treatment. Freezing items is another option, but the item should be wrapped in plastic or put into a bag and then placed in a freezer for a minimum of at least 3.5 days. Just leaving the items outside in the summer or winter is not typically sufficient, as temperatures can fluctuate throughout the day. And finally, encasements can be an effective tool to protect the mattress from future activity, but not all encasements are created equally. Some encasements are more durable and cost-effective than others, and some are just easier to install or have a better fit. So talk to your pest provider regarding recommendations on encasements and or pre-treated bedding materials. Okay, when it comes to documentation, again, you want to make sure that your pest management provider is including at least the following. Obviously, it should include the name of the provider and date of service, but you also want documentation to be detailed regarding any inspection that was conducted, specifically noting if live activity was identified and where it was found, such as room numbers or room numbers that were impacted or areas around the infested rooms. It should also include products that were applied. This is just a general regulatory requirement. And finally, it should include any special instructions regarding the property or prep requirements and any follow-up service needs. And in addition to everything I just mentioned, many pest management professionals will also include a service agreement of some kind. This document should outline the expectations and responsibilities between the provider and the property. It's important to be familiar with these requirements, and it will protect both parties related to any bedbug services completed on site. All right, this is my last slide. It includes a list of the additional materials for reference that you can use to educate your staff and employees. The bedbugtoolkit.com includes a wealth of information, including fact sheets, infographics, case studies, white papers, etc. Ecolab has also put together a collection of ebooks with easy to implement ideas to help you make quick wins and improvements throughout your property to help elevate your guest and resident experience. In addition to the references and links here, all of those who have registered for this session will receive a link to the recording and then additional links with information presented here. So I just want to say thank you all for attending this session. I really appreciate your time and your interest in this subject. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Olsen, for providing wealth of information around bedbugs today. And I hope our audience too is finding this session educative and valuable. We have a few questions submitted by the participants. So let's jump straight into the first one. What is the turnover time once a room is treated?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on the treatment that is used. There are products that can be applied that have labels that require a certain amount of room downtime or a time period where there can't be any occupants in the room. The label may say until the product's dried, or it may have a specific time frame, say 4 to 6 hours. But I will comment here that it is best to have a treatment completed and then a follow-up inspection and treatment to ensure that the program worked. What you wouldn't want to do is a one and done and have a room treated and then assume that it is bedbug free and then put a guest back in that room. So I would take that into consideration as well. And generally, treating a room and coming back the next day to do an inspection and treatment is the best solution because it gives enough time not only for the products to work, it gives time for the bedbugs to come out of their harborage areas, come in contact with the products, and then you have that follow-up inspection to ensure that the area is bedbug free.
Okay. The next question is the industry seeing an increase in bedbugs with the surge in travel?
Yes, good question. So just based on the biology and behavior of bedbugs and that they travel around on people's belongings, even though we went through a time period where people weren't traveling, the bedbugs were still around, living in people's residences and such. So as travel starts to open back up and people are moving around again, so are their bedbugs. And we have actually seen evidence of that with increases most recently in some of our more popular tourist areas or vacation hotspots, particularly following the spring break season. We started to see activity increase in those areas.
Great. The next one is, in addition to the visual inspections conducted by housekeeping and maintenance staff, excuse me, concerning prevention, is there a specific Ecolab product we can apply to help deter bedbugs?
Okay, so Ecolab does have a product available that you can use to, I wouldn't say deter bedbugs. It's not something, any products used, it does not necessarily deter bedbugs, but we do have a product available that you can use to knock down any live activity that's seen during those routine room duties. That product is available depending on your state and what state regulations apply within your area or region. But that product or any product alone will not solve a bedbug problem. We want to make sure that you're partnering with your pest management professional if you see live activity. Again, you could knock it down, but there's so many more that could be there and that could be recessed into those harborage areas. And you want to make sure that you're using that whole treatment program that I talked about with chemical and non-chemical means of control to make sure that you're fully eliminating it. But I would say reach out to your Ecolab sales rep for more information and availability for your particular area or hotel.
Going on to the next one. If a hotel guest complains about bed bugs and I move them to another location on the property, should that room also be treated?
Yes, that is a good question. I hear that one quite often, actually. So although the guest may have originally encountered the bed bugs in one room, moving them to another room, there is potential that they could be carrying activity into that new room. And so the recommendation would be that once that guest checks out, I would include that on your list of rooms to be inspected and treated by a pest professional.
Okay. The next one is, I've heard that chemicals do not work on bed bugs. Is heat the only proven method?
I would say no. I think it's important to have a combination of a chemical and non-chemical application method. So, and I talked about this a little bit in the presentation. There are some products that have been found to be ineffective, or we've seen some resistance of resistant strains of bed bugs where certain products don't work anymore. But there's still a whole lot of options out there that do work, and they work very well. And the nice thing about chemical applications is that you can provide the product application, and once it dries, it still has residual activity and efficacy against those remaining bed bugs that may be in an area or a room. But chemicals don't work on everything or every surface. So again, it's important to include a combination of chemical and non-chemical means of control, specifically when it comes to, say, a mattress or a box spring or an upholstered chair or sofa bed in a room. Chemicals are not the best means of control on those items.
Okay. So the next one is, which is kind of a follow-on question. Do staff need to know the SDS sheet information on products applied?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Priyanka? I think I missed the first part.
Do staff need to know the SDS sheet information on products applied?
Oh, okay. So I would say a pest management provider should be able to provide an SDS sheet if requested or upon request, or available in their logbook they may have on site. But a staff doesn't need to have that or need to review that prior. Your pest management professional should be providing instructions to you. So as I mentioned earlier, some products have recommendations where the area remains out of service for a period of time or until the product dries. And so they should be providing those instructions to you and your staff so that after that time period has been completed, according to the label, according to the SDS, you are then able to enter the room. Another thing to consider is, when this is why it's important to partner with an experienced professional, is that they should be familiar with those labels, and if they're applying product according to the label recommendations, like where to apply it, how to apply it, it's an EPA approved, they're EPA approved products, so they've been tested, and that label is really an instruction sheet of how it should be applied properly to keep everyone safe in the area that it has been applied to. So sorry, long answer there, but I guess I would say no, you don't need to know all the details and ins and outs of what's on that SDS, but it just goes to show why it's important to have a pest provider that can give you the instructions needed.
Okay. The next one is, how prevalent are bed bugs in other parts of the world?
Good question. We do find bed bugs worldwide. Again, they're a ectoparasite of humans, and wherever there are humans, there could potentially be bed bugs. We do see higher activity in some regions more so than others. I think part of that is just due to, well, there's two things. I think there's tolerance levels differ among the world on whether or not bed bugs are considered as much of a problem in some areas or another, just based on personal tolerance. But there's also different products and equipment available around the world, which may make it easier or harder to eliminate bedbug activity. But yeah, we do see them distributed everywhere around the world. The most common one is the common bedbug, but there is a tropical bedbug species that we see distributed around the equator as another species that we deal with worldwide.
That was definitely an interesting one. I think this is the final question. Why are bed bugs so difficult to control?
Yeah, I think what makes them the most difficult to control is that it's where they harborage and where they hide. I think it's hard to get access to those areas. I think another challenge is that we can't stop them or we can't prevent them from coming into a facility such as a hotel when they're coming in on guest belongings. And then they can go for so long without being noticed. And then that's the problem, and that's what leads to potential spread. And once an infestation spreads, the further it spreads, the harder it is to eradicate, because again, they can get into so many tiny cracks and crevices. And the old saying, snug as a bug in a rug, it comes from, actually derived from talking about bed bugs and how they would get themselves deep into woven rugs and be hard to find or hard to treat. So it just really all comes down to, again, the importance of partnering with a pest management provider that can help guide you through the right treatment plan for your facility and your needs.
Well, I'd like to thank Priyanka and Dr. Olsen for the great presentation and all the great information today. I would also like to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar titled Mitigating Bedbug Risks in the Post-Pandemic Area. As a reminder, a recording of today's webinar will be available on ecolab.com early next week. Also, all of those individuals on today's webinar will get an email with a link to that recording. For more information on our bedbug services, feel free to contact your local pest elimination partner. Information is on the screen here. Otherwise, again, we appreciate your time and attention today, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.